Chapter 5. The Vedic Age. A quick glance. The Vedic period. The Vedic literature and its parts. The class division during the Vedic period. Life of the people who lived during this period. The Indus Valley Civilization, also known as Harappan Civilization, came to an abrupt end by 1300 BCE. That was the time which marked the beginning of the Vedic period in the history of India. This period started with the arrival of new inhabitants in the northern and northwestern parts of India. They called themselves Arya, also known as the Aryans or Indo-Aryans today. They introduced Sanskrit language. The Aryans were quite different from the people of the Harappan civilization. The people in Harappan civilization lived a settled and developed life. They were peaceful people, whereas the Aryans were semi-nomadic tribals and herders. It is said that they traveled all the way from Central Asia to India in search of pasture for their cattle. They regarded cattle as their wealth. These Aryans were divided into different clans and had rivalry among themselves for the control of cattle and pastoral lands. Frequent clashes were a common occurrence among these people. Gradually, they transformed into an agricultural society. The Vedic period is marked from 1500 BCE to 600 BCE. This period is called the Vedic Age because of the 4 Vedas written during this period. These 4 Vedas are Rig Veda, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. It is believed that the Vedic age began with the arrival of the Aryans in India from Central Asia. There are a number of theories with regards to the Aryans, but the theory of Max Muller is the most famous one. The most acceptable theory is that the Aryans migrated from Central Asia in about 1500 BCE. They arrived in India in stages. They settled in India and marked the beginning of a new civilization. These people got to be known as Indo-Aryans. Initially, they came and conquered the northern India and later entered into the subcontinent across the passes of Hindu Kush mountains. They made their settlements in Sapta Sindhu or the region of the 7 rivers, the Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, Satluj, and Saraswati. This region is in the present-day Afghanistan, Punjab, and some parts of Uttar Pradesh. They named this region Brahmavarta or the land of the gods. In the later half, they moved eastwards and settled in the Gangetic Valley. This called this region Aryavarta or the land of the Aryans. The Vedic period can broadly be divided into early Vedic period 1500 BCE to 1000 BCE and later Vedic period 1000 BCE to 600 BCE. Vedic literature. The Vedas are the ancient and most sacred books of the Aryans. It is believed that they were created by the rishis, sages, and revealed by God Himself. These books are the chief source of information with respect to the study of Vedic age. The term Vedic literature means literature based on Vedas. The word Veda means knowledge. It is derived from the Sanskrit root word Ved that means to know. There are 4 Vedas that were composed during this period. They are as follows. Rig Veda. Many historians are of the opinion that the composition of Rig Veda dates to somewhere between c. 1500 and 1000 BCE, whereas some historians have opined that it was composed as early as in 2000 BCE. It is knowledge of the hymns of praise called Suktas for recitation. It is the oldest of the 4 Vedas. It is a collection of 1028 hymns and prayers in praise of gods and goddesses. Initially, it was not in written form. It was passed orally from generation to generation by rishis, sages. Yajur Veda. It is knowledge of the sacrificial formula of liturgy. It contains hymns that could be followed in ordinary sacrifices. The rituals reflect the social and political setup in which they arose. Samveda. It is knowledge of the melodies for chanting. It contains hymns to be sung by a special class of priests in religious sacrifices. It is mostly the rearrangement of the Rig Veda for musical rendering. Atharva Veda. It is the knowledge of magic spells, named after a special group of priests to cast away evil spirits. It is a collection of songs, spells, magical charms for putting away evil spirits, etc. Beside the four Vedas, the Vedic literature comprises of Samhitas, which deal with mantras, the Brahmanas, which deal with rituals and sacrifices, the Aryanks, which deal with philosophical doctrines, and the Upanishads, which deal with deep philosophical problems. The Upanishads deal with philosophy and evolved theories of karma, maya, and mukti. The Upanishads. The Upanishads are actually a part of the Vedic literature, but these lay emphasis on simple living and true actions. There are about 300 Upanishads, but the most famous among them are Isa, Katha, Taittiriya, Aitreya, Chandogya, etc. These Upanishads present a glimpse of the Indian philosophy. They explain numerous mysteries of life, explain the relationship of the soul and the creator, and elucidate the theory of karma, action, maya, illusion, and mukti, salvation. The earlier Upanishads are in prose and are written in the form of questions and answers. The later Upanishads are in the form of verses. These insisted that the spirit lives even after death. According to this text, a person can attain supreme truth by meditation and recitation of the verses. The views and thoughts of great men and women such as sage Yajnavalkya, Apala, Ghosha, Lopamudra, Sulabh Maitri, and Gargi Vachaknavi are compiled in the Upanishads. The Upanishads were further developed by Shankaracharya. The great epics Ramayana and Mahabharata. Two great epics were written during the later Vedic period, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These are considered to be important sources of information about the Vedic age. These provide information about the society and economy of that period as well. The Ramayana is an epic poem that was composed by Rishi Valmiki in Sanskrit. It tells the story of Rama and envisages an ideal family and society. The Mahabharata was written in Sanskrit in verses by Rishi Ved Vyas. It is an epic narrative of the great battle of Kurukshetra. It also includes the Bhagavad Gita, considered to be the jewel of India's spiritual wisdom. It explains the nature of consciousness, the self, the universe, and the supreme. Brahmavarta, or the early Vedic period, 1500 BCE to 1000 BCE. The Rig Veda puts light on the political, social, and cultural life of the early Vedic age. The hymns written in Rig Veda were generally composed by the rishis, sages. Hence, this period is also known as the Rig Vedic period. Their geographical area covered by the settlements of the early Vedic period span across eastern Afghanistan, undivided Punjab, and some parts of western Uttar Pradesh. Social life. In the initial stages, the Rig Vedic society was divided into two parts: the Aryans, foreigners, and the non-Aryans or Dasas or Dasyus, native people. The Dasas were the original inhabitant of the region where the Aryans came and established their settlements. Later on, the term Dasas was used to refer to slaves. During that period, polygamy was prevalent among the noble families in the society, while monogamy was a common practice. Snippet. The Vedas were orally composed and not written, hence they were known as Shruti, heard, and Smriti, memorized. This was how the Vedas were handed over from generation to generation. The society was later divided into fourfold divisions, namely the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, based on the occupation or profession of the people. Brahmins, they belonged to the priestly class of people. They were proficient in scriptures and performed religious rites. They also imparted education to the early Aryans. Kshatriyas, they belonged to the warrior class. They were responsible for defense and maintenance of law and order in the society. Vaishyas, they belonged to the merchant class and were agriculturists, traders, and artisans. Shudras, they belonged to the lowest level of the social ladder. They were the laborers or servants who served the three upper classes of people in the society. They performed tasks such as cleaning, fishing, removing dead bodies of animals and humans. Position of women. Women during that time had a respectable position in the society. They were given equal opportunities for their intellectual development as men. They were allowed to attend popular assemblies and religious ceremonies. In fact, no religious ceremony was considered complete without the presence of the wife with their husband. They also had right to choose their husbands in a ceremony called Swayamvar, choosing one's own husband. There was no parda system to be followed. The marriageable age of girls then was 16 to 17 years. Child marriage was not practiced during this period. The widows were also permitted to remarry. Renowned women's scholars like Gargi and Maitri flourished during the Rigvedic age. Snippet. Gargi and Maitri were two famous thinkers and philosophers of the early Vedic age. Many Vedic hymns were composed by them. Yajnavalkya was a great sage of that time who could not find suitable answers to certain questions put before him by Gargi. Maitri was the wife of sage Yajnavalkya, who had immense knowledge of the Vedas and the Upanishads. Political organization. In the early Vedic period, the Aryans were divided into tribal groups. The basic unit of political organization was Kula or family. The Rig Vedic society was patriarchal by nature. The eldest male member of the family was considered to be the head of their clan. He was known as the Grihipati or the Kulpati. Several families living together formed a village or a grama. The leader of the grama was known as the Gramani or the village headman. A group of villages formed a larger unit known as Vis. It was headed by the Vishyapati. All the adult men of Vis took part in the wars. The Aryans were divided into a number of tribes known as Janas. Each tribe had a separate kingdom and had its own Rajan or chieftain. The Rajan was assisted by a Purohita or priest and Senapati or the commander of the army. The head priest was responsible for performing all the religious ceremonies. The commanders of the army were responsible for advising on any important issue related to the safety of the kingdom. Assemblies were held and were known as sabhas and samitis. A sabha was a council of selected elders of the village. The samiti was a general assembly of all the people. A samiti always chose its rajan. Dress, ornaments, and food. The early Indo-Aryan men and women wore garments that were in three parts: an undergarment, upper garment, and lower garment. Their clothes were made of wool and cotton and were of different colors. The lower garments were dhoti, men, and rivi, women, tied around their waists. The upper garment was a light shawl. Men and women wore undergarments, vasas, upper cover called athivasas, and dhapis over their heads. They wore ornaments such as necklaces, earrings, and bangles made of gold, silver, and precious stones. The Aryans ate both vegetarian and non-vegetarian food. Being pastoralist, their main source of food was cattle. It means their staple food was milk and its products. They eat simple and healthy food that included wheat, rice, barley, vegetables, and fruits. Meat was eaten occasionally by these people. The Aryans also consumed soma, a juice of a plant, and sura, a barley drink, to prevent exhaustion. Recreation. The Aryans spent their leisure time in chariot racing, gambling, and hunting. They were fond of music and dance too. The musical instruments used by them were flutes, harps, drums, and cymbals. Economic condition. Rigvedic Aryans mainly practiced cattle rearing. Cow was considered to be a valuable part of their wealth. The word used in Rigveda for cow is gau. A rich man was known as Gomat, literally meaning a man who possesses cattle or cow in particular. There were frequent battle for the possession of cattle. The word used for those wars was Gavisti, which means search for cattle or cow. Agriculture was practiced extensively during that time. Also, those living under the same cowshed came to be considered to be of the same Gotra. The daughter of the house was known as Duhitri, meaning milker of the cow. They used tools made of iron to clear forest and used that land for habitation. Another important profession was carpentry. They made chariots and plows of wood and iron. Metal workers made articles of copper, bronze, and iron. The Aryans followed different occupations such as spinning, pottery, chariot making, and leather work. There was not much of trade. Barter system was prevalent. Later on, gold coins, nishka, were used for various transactions. Religion. The Aryans during this period worshipped the forces of nature. They worshipped Indra, god of rain and thunder, Agni, god of fire, Prithvi, goddess of earth, Vayu, god of wine, Varuna, god of water, Surya, sun god, Soma, god of plants, Yama, god of death, and Usha, goddess of dawn. The most significant one was Indra, who was considered as the leader of all the other gods and goddesses. There were no temples and no idol worship. Sages offered prayers, chanted mantras in open air, ghee, grains, and milk were given as offerings, and in some cases, animals were also sacrificed. These sacrifices or yajnas were performed by the Brahmins, making offerings to the god of fire. Aryavarta or the later Vedic period, 1000 BCE to 600 BCE. The Aryans moved towards the eastern parts of India during the later Vedic period. This marked the beginning of the Iron Age in India. The Aryans used to refer to iron as Sham Ayas, black metal. They now started living a more settled life and started undertaking agriculture on a large scale, which enhanced their prosperity. Towns began to develop. This period is also called the second urbanization because the first urbanization period of this region was the Harappan civilization. The next three Vedas, namely Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda, were composed during this period. The Upanishads and the two great epics, namely the Ramayana and Mahabharata, were also composed during this period. Towards the end of later Vedic period, the Aryans extended towards Kosala, Awadh in Uttar Pradesh, and Videha, Mithila in northern Bihar. Political organization. The small tribal organizations, Janas, developed into larger kingdoms. Many Janas were amalgamated to form Janpadas. The Janpadas established during this time were Kuru and Panchala, which flourished in the beginning, but they came to fall and the kingdoms like Kosala, Kashi, Varanasi, and Videha, Mithila came into prominence. As the kingdoms flourished, the power of the kings also increased. They enjoyed absolute power and their position became hereditary. The Sabha and Samiti lost their importance and their powers were taken over by the king. A large number of officials assisted the king. Those included the treasury officer, royal messenger, tax collectors, and others. The kings assumed titles like Raja Visvajanam, Ekrat, Maharaj Adiraj, and Samrat. The kings performed many sacrifices and yajnas to strengthen their position. After ascending the throne, the Rajasuya Yajna consecration ceremony was performed. The king attained the position of God's representative on earth. Ashwamedha Yajna, horse sacrifice, established the supreme authority of the king over the lands. As all of these rituals and sacrifices could not be performed without the priest, their position elevated to the highest most class. Social life. The four divisions of the society, the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, became rigid. Caste was now determined by birth and not by occupation. The two higher classes, caste, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, enjoyed all the privileges in the society. All those privileges were denied to the Vaishyas and Shudras. Intercaste marriage and intercaste dining was strictly forbidden. New subcaste came into existence as per the occupations. Snippet. Coronation of the king was followed by striking him on the back by the road. Dandir Ghanti by the Advaryu priest, by which the king was declared Adandya, above punishment. Family. The structure of the family saw a change during this period. The constitution of the family became more patriarchal and the people desired the birth of a son. Now, the head of the family could disinherit his son. Male ancestors came to be worshipped. Status of women. The power and the stature of the male of the house increased during the later Vedic age. The status of women declined and they were considered inferior to men. Women lost their rights of attending the assemblies. However, they continued to be a part of the religious ceremonies. Their primary duty was to serve their husbands and take care of the household chores. Education was just available to the women of the upper classes. Widows were not allowed to remarry anymore. Athreya Brahmana describes the life of a daughter as a source of misery. The four ashramas. The religious texts of this era describe how the life of a man should be conducted. The ashrama system was suggested, which was divided into four parts. Each ashramas or stage had certain special features and functions which were the four stages ashramas of life. Brahmacharya ashrama. Age 7 to 25 years. Way of life. An individual stayed in the Gurukul and received education. The focus was on healthy, positive training and discipline. Grihastha Ashrama. 25 to 50 years. The householder phase of life where an individual lived with his spouse and children, fulfilling the duties of his family. Vanprastha Ashrama. 50 to 75 years. An individual gave up his worldly life and focused on spiritual practices, meditation, and prayer. In this stage, the individual retreated to a quiet place. Sannyasa Ashrama. 75 to 100 plus years. It was the last stage of an individual's life. The only goal of life was now attaining and spreading spiritual knowledge. Religion. Later, Vedic people worshipped a trio of gods: Prajapati, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. They also worshipped some symbolic objects and idols. Pushan, the god of cattle, was worshipped by the Shudras. Female deities such as Lakshmi, Durga, Kali, and Parvati were also worshipped. Sacrifices became more important than prayers. The Brahmins who performed these complicated sacrifices were held in high esteem and were given generous dakshinas or offerings. Economic life. During this period, agriculture was the principal occupation. Aryans now use the improved method of cultivation by plowing, manuring, and sowing seeds. Rice, wheat, barley, and lentils were the main crops. Trade and commerce also increased. Trading was done both in their land as well as with their overseas lands. People took up different occupations such as chariot makers, dyers, weavers, goldsmiths, ironsmiths, carpenters, etc. They used painted grey vessels, the remains of which have been excavated from many sites of northern India. System of education. During the Vedic age, the Gurukul system of education was established. A Gurukul was the house of the Guru. The students and the Gurus lived in the same house. The Guru or the teacher considered his students as his own children. The Gurus gave them the lessons to gain positive energy and mental attitude. The students were also taught religion, grammar, philosophy, medicine, astronomy, astrology, ethics, art, and logic. They were also expected to clean the house, gather wood, bring water from the well or the nearby river, and work in the fields. They also learned the art of sword fighting, archery, wrestling, etc. to be used in the battlefield. Education was confined to the upper caste. At the completion of their education, the students paid Guru Dakshina, an offering to the Guru. A comparison of the early and later Vedic periods. King. Early Vedic period. Tribal chief was called Rajan. Later Vedic period. king was known by titles like Ekrat, Raja Visvajanam, or Samrat. Occupation. Early Vedic period. Agriculture and cattle herding. Cow was considered to be a part of wealth. Later Vedic period. Improvement in agriculture with iron tools, improvement in crafts like carpentry, chariot making, weaving, pottery, jewelry making, etc. Political organization. Early Vedic period. A group of villages formed a larger unit called Vis. It was headed by a Vishyapati. Later Vedic period, many janas amalgamated to form Janpadas. These developed into kingdoms headed by a king. Religion. Early Vedic period. Nature worship. They worshipped Indra, Prithvi, Agni, Vayu, Surya, and Varun. Simple rituals in open air. No temples and no idols. Later Vedic period. Important gods were Prajapati, Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. Complex rituals and sacrifices. Caste. Early Vedic period. Caste system based on occupation with four castes: Brahmin, priest, Kshatriya, warriors, Vaishyas, farmers and craftsmen, and Shudras, Dasas, laborers and servants. Later Vedic period. Caste system became rigid and hereditary. Women. Early Vedic period. Women held a position of respect and could attend assemblies and offer prayers. Later Vedic period. Although women's presence was essential in religious ceremonies, their status in society declined and women came to be regarded as inferior to men. Some upper caste women received education. Somewhere else in the world. The mysterious Olmec civilization, located in ancient Mexico, prospered in pre-classical formative Mesoamerica from 1200 BCE to 400 BCE and is generally considered the forerunner of all subsequent Mesoamerican cultures, including the Maya and Aztecs. With their heartlands in the Gulf of Mexico, now the states of Veracruz and Tabasco. Olmec influence and trade activity spread from 1200 BCE, even reaching as far south as present-day Nicaragua. Monumental sacred complexes, massive stone sculptures, ball games, the drinking of chocolate, and animal gods were all features of Olmec. Glossary. Indo-Aryan, the Aryans who migrated from Central Asia to India. Vedic age, the age in which the four Vedas were composed. Sapta Sindhu, the region of seven rivers. This was the region where the Aryans first settled. Brahmavarta, the land of gods. Gramani, head of the village. Janas, tribes into which the Aryans were politically divided. Sabha, a small assembly consisting of important members of the tribe. Samiti, the larger assembly of the entire people. Dasas, original inhabitants of India. Swayamvara, a practice of choosing a husband by a girl of marriageable age. Rajasuya Yajna, a ritual by which the king was elevated to the position of God's representative on earth. Ashwamedha Yajna, a ritual by which the king's undisputed authority was established over his and the neighboring lands. Gurukul, a system of education received by the students at the house of gurus. Ashramas, four stages of men's life: Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. Guru Dakshina, offerings paid to the guru or teacher after a student completed his education. Recap. The Vedic age continued from 1500 BCE to 600 BCE. It was broadly divided into two parts: Early Vedic Age and Later Vedic Age. During Early Vedic Age, 1500 to 1000 BCE, the Aryans settled in the Sapta Sindhu region and later in the Brahmavarta. The Early Vedic Age had a patriarchal society and was divided into four Varnas based on occupation, which was flexible: the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Women held high esteem in the early Vedic age, while it declined with the incoming of the later Vedic age. Religion comprised of simple rituals and nature worship. During later Vedic age, 1000 BCE to 600 BCE, the Aryas settled in the Aryavarta. The four Varnas became rigid and were based on birth. In the later Vedic age, religion became complex and elaborate rituals were observed. Iron came to be used in this period. Four ashramas of life to be established. Gurukul system of education was introduced.